Welcome to True Crime News with the COE. I am Ileana, and I am known as the chief of everything on STS, but this is an entirely different channel. This is STS True Crime Talk, and we have different hosts that are going to be hosting their own shows every day. So this will be my show. And today, the topic is going to be Lori Vallow Daybell. Before we get into that, I do want to introduce myself since some of you guys don't know me. My background is broadcast journalism. I used to be a network news correspondent for both CBS News and News Nation. I also worked locally as a reporter and an anchor in LA, New York, DC, and Philly. And I am honored to have two amazing guests with me today. We have Gigi from Pretty Lies and Alibis. Many of you may already know her from her channel, but if not, you've probably seen her on Law and Crime or even Court TV. I think she was on last night. So Gigi is a freelance journalist, and she's also an advocate, constantly helping a lot of people behind the scenes as well. And then we have Megan Connor. And if you don't know Megan Connor and you're watching this show or interested in the Lori Vallow Daybell case, then you definitely should know her. And that's because she is Lori's cousin. But Megan is also so much more than that. She has now come on YouTube with her own channel. She discusses a lot of different topics. She discusses her relationship with the Mormon Church. She discusses her family and overcoming, obviously, all of the trauma and challenges that she's faced with that. So welcome to Gigi and to Megan, and welcome to everyone who's watching for the first time. We appreciate you guys being here. Please remember to hit like and subscribe. Gigi, let's start with you. I just want to welcome you in. You obviously have been following the Lori Vallow Daybell case from the beginning. I believe you were there for the entire first trial. So give me your background on what interested you initially on this case.
So the podcast was really born off of this case, and it was really just COVID boredom. So my best friend and I were I'd done true crime years ago, and then just got out because too much travel, being away from my kids. It's not what I wanted. And then I remember that first press release about the missing kids, and I just started reading up on it. You know, at that point, everybody had binged all of Netflix. I mean, it's like I'd watched everything on YouTube. But when COVID hit, I really just started diving deep into everybody's social media accounts. I was going to the Wayback Machine, learning everything I could about these people before they became headlines. And obviously just crossing fingers and toes that they would find JJ and Tylee unharmed. And so we just followed the story. And the day that Nate Eaton was up in the helicopter over Chad's property, the day they found the kids, I said, look, let's start this podcast we've been throwing around. So we started with an iMac built-in microphone. It was horrible. We went live the entire time they were on that property. And then from there, just started doing episodes mainly about Lori and Chad. In fact, I think we called it like the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell podcast, and then just decided that we had fun doing what we did and started covering other things. But yeah, so Lori and Chad definitely, the first big case we covered. And so JJ and Tylee and Tammy and Charles will always just have this huge place in my heart.
And before I get to Megan, I just want to give you guys background in case you're not familiar with the case. So Lori Vallow Daybell is known as the Doomsday Mom. A lot of you guys may have remembered the coverage. She was that mom that was seen in Hawaii. Her kids were missing. No one knew where her kids were. And she was just out frolicking with her new boyfriend. Well, she's now also been dubbed the most hated mom in America. And that's because she was found guilty in Idaho of killing her two young kids, Joshua JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Lori was also found guilty of her role in the death of Tammy Daybell. That's Chad Daybell's first wife. And then Lori Daybell was also sentenced to life in prison. I believe it was 3 life sentences, if I'm correct. So she obviously has a very twisted background. And no one knows that background and that relationship and that history more than Megan, who is part of the family. Megan, this is obviously a personal story for you. You know everyone involved. You know the case. And now you're sitting here not only as a family member, but also as someone who is assessing everything that has gone on and is continuing to watch what has really become almost like a true life horror show.
It's been it has been a saga for the family for sure, and it's definitely I keep saying not something that I had on my bingo card. just to lighten it a little bit. This past week, I was going through getting ready to do on my channel a timeline of the whole case, for those people who are new to it, and just remembering how I was feeling back in July of 2019 when all of this began with the shooting of Charles Vallow. And yeah, it throws me right back into that time where none of us really knew exactly what was going on. We knew that obviously that Charles had been killed, and some of us right away did not believe that that was self-defense. And ever since that moment, we're concerned for the outcome for everyone in our family, and just watched it all unfold in the media, kind of, because our family wasn't really communicating that much with each other. So it was a difficult time, and it's kind of, we've gotten some justice along the way, which has been wonderful. This couple of trials, we're just hoping to wrap it up quickly. But as everybody has seen, Lori continues to make it as difficult as possible to get closure and healing and all of that stuff that everybody's hoping for.
And I don't know if, and you would know this better than I do, I don't know if families ever really get closure when they have that kind of immense loss. But
Yeah,
in this case, at least you did see 3 life sentences, which was, I guess the best option. But now Lori is about to start yet another murder trial. And you just mentioned it. It's for Charles Vallow. And that was her 4th husband. For those of you that don't know, in 2019, Charles was shot to death by Lori's late brother, Alex, who claimed it was self-defense. Family says they don't think that's the case. And now Lori is going to not only take the stand, but is defending herself in Arizona in a trial that begins on March 31st. I know that both of you guys have been covering a lot of her motions, a lot of her hearings and following all of the motions that she's been filing. Lori, for those of you that don't know her, let me put this up here. This is Lori. She's definitely a character. A lot of people emailed us saying that they don't want to watch Lori's show because they don't want to give her the attention that she wants. They don't want to watch the trial because they don't want to continue to give her that spotlight after everything that she did. Megan and Gigi, as you guys are waiting for the trial to start, is there anything that you're sort of dreading or anything that you're sort of looking forward to in terms of what may surprise you with Lori? I feel like Lori always has a lot up her sleeve.
For me, I just really dread that, Charles's sons, Charles's siblings have to go through yet another painful trial where they have to hear all of the horrible details about how their loved one was shot and killed in this really selfish game of playing God. So for me, that's what I dread. Really, I'm not going to lie, y'all. I just look forward to the train wreck that is bound to happen when Lori starts defending herself. It's going to be a hot mess. You look at her filings, especially the latest where she doesn't want court TV even in the courtroom, much less streaming the trial. It's so personal in that filing that Lori really hasn't separated that personal, whatever she's got brewing in here and whatever beef she has with whatever network. She can't set that aside and just act like an attorney, but she's not. So I really think that it's, she has nothing to lose by representing herself. She's got 3 life sentences in Idaho, may as well go ahead. And as much as she says she doesn't like the negative media coverage, she's inviting it. And we see that because she's going to be one of the main speakers or people being interviewed on this week's Dateline with Keith Morrison. So to me, I feel like she's really milking this spotlight that's left for all it's worth, because really after Charles's trial and then Brandon's, which the judge indicates he would like to flip these around and get that one going really quickly. She's trying to say her rights have been violated by not having a speedy trial. She will go back to Idaho and kind of fade into the bowels of the prison system. And we'll see her on a random documentary that pops up every now and then. So I think she's very aware the time is ticking near, 5 years later after the kids were reported missing, that this is almost over as far as her moments in the spotlight. I'm selfish and I say I'm here for it. I'm willing to watch anything about Lori. Don't call me from 9 to 10 Friday because I'm totally watching Dateline. But she knows what she's doing in spite of these pleadings of I don't want the negative media attention. You killed, you had a hand in killing I'll say 4 because I know Charles's death was a murder. You invited that negative media attention, so don't cry foul when you're getting that negative media attention.
Well, and I mean, she seems to love it. Even here, as you look at any of her photos, I mean, she's almost glowing in these moments where the average person would be like completely horrified and broken and devastated. Like these are moments where like she has a smirk on her face. She's taking it in. Megan, for you, as we wait for March 31st to get closer and the trial begins, obviously this is a little bit more emotional and personal for you. What are you dreading, or what is the part that is going to be most difficult for you?
I dislike it every time Lori opens her mouth, honestly. It's a little bit triggering to hear her voice and her affect sounding just the same as she always has, even after the horrific things that she's done. You know, she seems unaffected, she seems unremorseful. And she seems, as Gigi's saying, she loves the spotlight. She loves milking this opportunity. I think that's absolutely what she's doing, is milking this last opportunity to be in the spotlight before she goes back to Idaho and fades into oblivion, we hope. So she knows this is her last hurrah. She's taking advantage of it. And it's just hard to see her out there continuing to manipulate as many people as she possibly can, and doing so successfully in some cases. You know, you see her attorneys talking and laughing with her sometimes. One thing I am really grateful for is that Judge Boreski seems to have absolutely no time for her shenanigans. He has denied her motion to have both of these cases dismissed. Her speedy trial rights have not been violated, but she's going to continue to try and get as much out of this as she possibly can. She's going to make all the arguments. She's going to make all the motions. I think it was really telling when she filed the court TV motion that she didn't want cameras, she didn't want court TV's cameras in the courtroom, alleging that court TV was using her and her husband as a 24/7 commercial. And I thought it was hilarious to note that, first of all, court TV is not one of the channels that they're allowed to watch where she is. So she wouldn't know whether they were airing that or not. And secondly, just the grandiosity and the arrogance to assume that a major national, and one could argue global, news network is going to have her on there 24/7. It's just part of her delusion.
I actually made a graphic about this very thing that I realized I didn't put in there. So let me just pull it up since you guys brought it up. And this is obviously a big talker. I mean, I feel like she almost is saying she doesn't want cameras because now it's created a whole moment for her about wanting the cameras, not wanting the cameras. But this is what she said. She said, court TV should be ashamed of its very nature and its request, since its sole objective is not to bring people real news or facts, but instead, its objective is to entertain the public with the very true life tragedies that happen in real people's lives. I mean, the fact that she even has the audacity to call other people out when she's done everything that she's done. And again, like, she has another murder trial that she is up against. Like, if this was me or someone that is reasonable, or any of us, I feel like that would be the least of your worries.
Yeah, this is a game to her. And part of playing the game is objecting to something she actually wants, because it just gives her a chance to object and to be, in the spotlight again. So she does want cameras in the courtroom. She does want as much attention as possible, but filing a motion and making this statement out here gets her more attention. So she's going to keep doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I just want to add to, I feel bad for Lori's family as well. Nobody asked to be thrown into this situation, neither side of any family, so I know people have had choice words, when Lori was defended, but, I always look at it as this: if my brother comes to me and my niece and nephew are missing and he says, look, they're fine, like, I've got some stuff going on, I would believe my brother. So I just wanted to throw in there, it's not just the victim side of the family that I feel bad for. I feel bad for all sides. It's an unimaginable burden that none of us could imagine ever. Thank goodness. But, everybody has their different burdens, but nonetheless, Nobody's lives will ever be the same that were immediately touched by these tragedies, whether it's the Daybell side or the Cox side or, the Woodcocks, Charles's sons. They've had to go to trial, and they were there for some of Lori's trial because they lost their brother JJ. Now they're going to have to sit through a trial where they hear the horrible way their father was ambushed, shot, and killed. My heart just goes. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm not saying just the victim side of the family. My heart goes out to all sides.
Well, and Neil is bringing up a good point. So by having her defend herself, this creates an unusual situation where now she is playing all roles in the courtroom. She is the defendant. She is herself. She is also now getting to question different people on the other side. And so I feel like this will just create also a very uncomfortable situation just for everyone. Like, not only are you going in already having to deal with the emotional repercussions of the last few trials and how hard that was, but now you have to literally face this woman and then go on the stand and then have her question you about the validity of your statements and your truth.
I can say that Kay Woodcock, I think I'm good to say this for her. She is excited to have Lori have to cross-examine her because, you think about it, this is the first time Lori actually has to talk to Kay. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I were in a bar fight, I'd want Kay on my side. She is sweet as honey, but I would never want to cross that woman. And I think this could be one of the most tense cross-exams for Lori, not for Kay. Kay's here for it. Kay's been to hell and back. There's not much Lori could say or do to make her feel bad on that stand. And unfortunately, I'm probably going to miss that because my son turns 18 on April 4th. Well, if jury selection goes 3 weeks, maybe not. But I missed his last birthday because of Lori, and I'm not going to miss the big one because of her again. Some things are just more important. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to have some popcorn popped and ready when Kay Woodcock takes that stand because I think it's going to be more uncomfortable for Lori by far.
How long was the first trial's jury selection?
Oh, it wasn't even a full week. It was a lot quicker than we thought.
Oh, that's fast. Yeah.
Yep. Days, 3 or 4 days, maybe, if that. Sat in there with John Pryor. He was in there. We weren't allowed in the courtroom for jury selection. So we had to go down to this media room where they had these 2 screens up. You really couldn't see nothing. But John Pryor, I remember one day he was sitting right in front of me, just taking notes because Chad's trial was, he was still preparing for Chad's trial. He really got a front row seat to a lot of stuff. He was in court a lot. Kind of weird.
Yeah. So I don't want to say that I question needing 3 weeks to do jury selection because it was the prosecuting attorney who actually asserted that it would take 2 to 3 weeks. I think that's largely because they don't know how Lori is going to handle it, not knowing criminal procedure and not knowing all of the rules and everything like that. It could slow things down a lot. And so I'm just hoping that 3 weeks is a little bit of an overestimate because, I have a life to live too. April is a very busy month for me and my family. So I'm kind of want to get these things over with.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing up this comment from IGG Rocks. She's a friend of the show. She says, COE, please tell me that Joel is going to snuggle his Keith Morrison pillow while watching Dateline this week. So for those of you guys that don't know, my husband is Joel. He's a host of our other channel, Surviving the Survivor. And yes, he does have a Keith Morrison pillow. And yes, he probably will. We're definitely going to be watching the show on Friday. But for those of you who do not know, this is actually the biggest news, really, is that Lori Vallow Daybell decided to do a prison interview, and she did it with Dateline, so with Keith Morrison. Fun fact, I was one of Keith Morrison's associate producers, which pretty much means I was a paid intern. But this will be Lori's first sit-down interview, I think, ever since she's been in prison. Is that right? Okay. So I do have some video that I pulled. I want to share it for you ladies, and then I want to get some reaction. I also have some reaction from Keith Morrison. He did do a few online interviews with various NBC stations. And then I also have some reaction from Colby about his mom. So first, let me play this. It's going to be a very quick little teaser. All right, here we go.
Some
How
fascinating
could you
stories.
possibly think that Chad would be exonerated after what happened?
The same way I will be exonerated. We will both be exonerated in the future.
Because?
I have seen things in the future that Jesus showed me when I was in heaven. And we were not in jail. And we were not in prison. And they were still in the future from now.
Keith's like, all right.
Megan, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, this is why it's frustrating to even see Lori out there, doing her own thing, representing herself in trial. We're going to have more of this nonsense to listen to. She can't even let Keith Morrison finish a comment before she has to interject with her nonsense. And, we're going to have to hear more of this stuff about when she saw Jesus or when she was in heaven and Jesus told her and God told her. I don't know how much of that the judge is going to allow. She certainly is going to use it as an opportunity or use the trial as an opportunity to preach. Just seeing this little clip where she believes that she and Chad are going to be exonerated, though, it does reconfirm to me that she is still in her delusion. She still absolutely believes that she is a goddess. She believes she's been wrongly imprisoned. She believes that she didn't do anything wrong. And that I guess the prison walls are going to fall down and she's just going to walk out scotch-free, just like happens in the Bible sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, Tiger Lily brought up a good point. Colby did interview his mom on his YouTube channel. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend you go. Just the delusion is strong with this one. Yeah. And look, I think that Lori knew right from wrong when all this was going down because she made up some very elaborate lies. When the police came knocking looking for JJ, she's with Melanie Gibb. Had this whole fabrication of what happened with Charles Vallow. So she knew right from wrong. But I think if we said that this was just an act, I really think she is just in the throes still of this delusion, and it's leading the way with her, and it's still to me it's very, very scary just that people even think this stuff.
And Keith Morrison did share a little bit about what the interview process was like with her. So I do want to play this, and then I'll show a little clip from Colby. So let's go to Keith first. Here we go.
Contentious interview. She is a very aggressive person when she wants to be. It was combative. She can be very sarcastic. She can be very flirtatious. She is charismatic. She's a very difficult person to interview. She had her own agenda, and she wanted to tell a story. And I knew the story wasn't true. So I was trying to get her to answer the questions I had for her. And that was not easy. So it was a fascinating conversation. And we had a limited amount of time for it. So it at times was one that you tried to hurry along, but she had her own speed.
I'm smiling just because I feel like Keith is just always in character. Keith is very much himself. Even in person, he sounds like that. But does this surprise you, or is this just like on brand for her, spot on to be combative? Like she wants to do this interview because she has her agenda and she wants to push it right before the trial.
100% on brand. This is the Lori that I've always known. And this is what the whole reason I started even speaking publicly is because the narrative, I think, prior to the trial was that she was this great mom. She was the cupcake mom. She was a cheerleader, Mrs. Texas and all of that. And then she met Chad and boom, she snapped into this other person. And that's just not the case. She's always been manipulative. It may have been a little bit less detectable in her early years. It may have been a little less toxic in her earlier years, but this is the same Lori that I've always seen. She has an agenda. She's going to get her words in. She is going to get what she wants at all costs. And so this is the Lori brand.
I think she probably went into this interview in her own mind thinking she would lead it, that it would be her narrative. Keith Morrison's just there, he's kind of the vessel for her to get her message out. And I mean, that's what I've heard is it does get a bit tense in parts because he holds her feet to the fire like any good journalist would, and not just give them a platform to spew wackadoodle all over the place. So it's going to be worth the watch for me, because I always try to understand her. Anytime for me, something like when she interviewed with her son Colby, it was enlightening to me. Not that I agreed with a word she said, but it gives you that glimpse into her way of thinking, which has always been somewhat of a mystery, because like Megan said, she was manipulative before. You see that plain as day in the Joe Ryan custody battle. She was just up to some shenanigans way back when Tylee was like 3-4 years old. But, Chad, apparently being the brother of Jesus in a past life, just threw her for a spin. And then you had this break with her. I just, for me, it's like over the years, I went from she's just evil, and that is the whole excuse, to really sort of thinking about things and saying, there is this delusion in her where, before Chad, maybe she wasn't the best mom, but she didn't kill her kids. They always looked very well taken care of. Tylee had braces, hair was always cut, nicely dressed. They seem happy. So for me, it's just fascinating to try to understand her way of thinking, as crazy as it may be, because then that helps us, in the future. Like, you look, I've been doing a recap on the Ruby Frankie documentary on Hulu, and the parallels there at times are uncanny. I wonder, did Ruby and Jody Hildebrandt follow this case? Because now the kids are possessed. They're losing their light. And then we had the Blaze Thibodeau, the kid who his mom thought the same way Lori and Chad did, took off with him, was going to the wilderness, so in some ways, what happened with Chad and Lori, especially in the Blaze Thibodeau case, really prevented a tragedy, because, when we look at these body cam videos of Charles, unfortunately, he was not taken seriously, and he was a male victim of domestic violence. It's a conversation we need to have more, but just everything Charles said on those body cam videos ended up becoming true. And so for me, it's like, had somebody listened to Charles, those very first calls, would we even know Lori's name? Maybe not. Yeah, I could sit and think about this and talk about this all day. There's so many tentacles with this case. And
Gigi, you hit so many nails right on the head. First of all, to say that Keith Morrison is the vessel for Lori to get done what she wants to get done. And that's really all you need to know about Lori. No matter who is across the table from her or on the other end of the phone line, whoever it is, you can guarantee that she is using that person for what she needs. And when she's done, she will discard them. And that's what we saw happen to Joe, happen to Charles, happen to the children. And also, I do want to highlight, you hit a good point. I watched the Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie documentary that came out on Hulu on Thursday, and then sat with Mormon Stories podcast and
for 6
Lauren
hours, by the way.
Matthias
Yeah.
from Hidden True Crime for 6 hours. And we did talk about the parallels between these two crimes. The documentary, to me, highlighted the fact that Jody Hildebrandt was taking a page out of Chad Daybell's book 100%. And it all comes back to that book, Visions of Glory. Anybody who read that book or had anything to do with it or its author, including people like Tim Ballard, if you haven't followed that case, people like Ken Krogh, who's another therapist who was arrested for abuse, that whole group of people took their crazy ideas from that Visions of Glory book, The End of Times, and also just the idea of possessed spirits and light and dark and all of that. It's just a really twisted thing. So I'm glad we're talking about it so that more people don't end up harmed.
And it starts in such subtle ways for the most part. Unlike Chad, I was Jesus's brother in a past life. I was also the Holy Ghost. But with Jody Hildebrandt, it really, I say that Jody is Chad to Ruby's Lori, because you have somebody who's festering really different ideas, especially in Ruby's world of parenting. And then you get somebody like Jody, who really kind of has a loaded God complex. And by the end of it, Ruby's all in with Jody. She's kicked her husband and her son out of the house. And in the end, 2 of her kids that she built a YouTube channel on and made millions of dollars off of end up becoming nearly 2 victims. If that kid hadn't have got out, those 2 kids would have been dead. And it really kind of would have been in the same orbit to me as Lori and Chad, evil, possessed, You're a dark spirit, and it's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
And think about those kids, what they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their life. If you've never seen the uncensored wound photos from the youngest son, don't seek them out. But these are not little scratches. These are down to bone. In some places, tying these kids down with weights so they couldn't get up. Geez. But when you're convinced of something and you have somebody that is pushing you right down that path alongside you, it becomes very powerful what you will allow to happen and what you'll do to your kids because you think this is a holy cause.
Yeah.
Well, and Wise Child saying it best. I mean, this is also scary. It's not just one case. It's not just Lori. I mean, we're talking about Ruby. We're talking about Lori. We're talking about all of these different cases where we're seeing these very similar and disturbing parallels. I know that Colby addressed Lori Vallow Daybell's recent interview with Keith Morrison, and he said all of this for him is constantly difficult as he's having to readdress and relive everything and reabsorb and reassess. He said that Dateline reached out to him. He initially did not want to do an interview, but he was so upset about his mom blaming Tylee that he said he wanted to set things straight and go on the record. So I do think ultimately he ended up going on, I don't know how long he'll be in the Dateline piece, but I think he is going to be at the beginning of the 2-hour episode that airs on Friday. But this is Colby's reaction. For those of you that don't know, Colby is Lori's son. He does have his own channel. I believe it's just Colby J. Ryan on YouTube. So if you haven't watched any of his videos, it's definitely very interesting. And it's hard to watch too. I mean, these are people, obviously, as Megan knows, that are personally affected and their lives are forever changed. So this is a Colby that I'm going to pull up right now.
Changed her tune? Is she doubling down? These are the questions I have. Only because it really pertains to my sister the most. Of course, it involves my entire family, but she's blaming Tylee for everything. And that doesn't fly with me, and I'm not okay with it. I can't tell you other than numbness. I don't know how I feel about this. I guess at this point, I've talked to you guys about radical acceptance. I think I just have accepted that she's going to make the biggest SH show out of this possible, and this whole situation, as long as she can drag things out, as long as she can do what she's doing, she's going to do that. She's going to make it worse. She's going to drag her feet, and she's going to do this. So
And Gigi and Megan, as you're watching this, I mean, obviously he had that very long interview with his mom. He told Lori that he was recording it and that he was going to be sharing this with his community, with the world. And yet he said he got no truth out of that there was no remorse. If anything, she was just constantly blaming everyone but herself, that she truly believes, or that she says she believes, that she is completely innocent of this. Listening to Colby hear this and saying that he's now numb from having to, watch this, relive this, and think about what's to come. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I understand the numbness, because it's kind of like when you've been through something so difficult, and you realize that you're going to be going through some of the same feelings and emotions every time you hear Lori speak, and every time you hear her devalue her victims and not take responsibility. Those same emotions of anger and fury and rage are going to come up again, and also grief, so many different emotions. So I understand the numbness of like, okay, here we go again. I'm just, not able to really engage with those emotions at first. But then as soon as for me personally, as soon as I hear her speak or see her on the screen, the emotions do come, and so it's like you're almost reserving your energy for that time when it's going to feel the worst, and just know that you're going to be drained afterwards. It's almost like we unfortunately are really familiar with this horrible cycle of, having the emotions come up and then having to process them and then being sort of drained for a few days afterwards.
Yeah, and I think Colby, what an amazing young man. He has really lost everybody he grew up with as far as his mom and Tylee and JJ. And he's gone on to have a beautiful little family of his own, and he's using his platform to enlighten us of the mom he knew before, but also, call her out. And essentially, if I'm not mistaken, in that interview with her, he pretty much said, I'm done. Like, you can't be a part of my kids' lives in any way and can't keep going. But you have to understand, like, for so long, it was Colby and Tylee, and they were sort of tagging along for all of Lori's chaos, Joe Ryan, and then you go to Charles and things kind of get normal. And then the chaos after, where Colby was out of the house pretty much by the time things went really south with Charles, but Tylee was in the middle. And I always think, back to that police interview at the Gilbert police station, or Chandler, after Charles was shot. And if you look before that investigator comes in, that kid is going through so many emotions. She's nervous. She's very fidgety, but you see her at one point start to cry, and immediately she's able to turn it off and just stoically look ahead. And I think that has to be conditioning from her life with her mom, turning on that emotion when she needed to, turning it off when Lori didn't want it there. But I'll just never forget, she kind of bangs her hands down on the chair, wipes her face with her t-shirt, and you just think, that hour they were out driving around after Charles was shot. They're looking for flip-flops. They're going through Burger King, taking JJ to school. That poor child is getting coached on what to say when they get back to the house and law enforcement's there. And then later for that police interview, which I did an episode on all the discrepancies. If you put all three of their interviews side by side, there are so many discrepancies in all of their stories. I felt like Lori and Alex should have been stopped that day. It was so clear. Lori was in the house. Lori wasn't in the house when he was shot. Just so many different things. Did you talk to Lori after she left? No. Well, we got phone data that says you did. It wasn't until the kids went missing and then they realized Tammy Daybell's dead that, oh my gosh, we should take a look at this. Gosh, it's just crazy. But I always feel so bad for what she must have went through emotionally in her last months of life, to be uprooted from where all your friends and family are, to go to Idaho with a guy we know she didn't like. And Chad made that clear that Tylee didn't like him. My gosh. I mean, what both these kids, with JJ being autistic, routines are so crucial for normalcy with kids that have autism. That structure is really such an important part of their daily life. And then, at the same time, he's being uprooted from his little school where he has his support system, close to his grandparents, up to a freezing cold place where nobody. And a week after they're there, his sister disappears and he doesn't see her again. Both of those babies, what they must have went through, aside from what happened when they were killed, there couldn't have been any happiness in their little hearts from the time they left, or really even before then, when things got really crazy, when Lori all of a sudden left Charles. There's just so many different angles of tragedy in this story. And I don't care how long I've been covering this case. When I sit down and take inventory or think about things, it blows me away every time, just at how much was at play in this case from so many angles. And in the end, the victims, were the ones that paid the ultimate price. And those kids, just psychologically, well before the murder, they were victims that whole year.
But that's the sad part. I'm sure not even just a year, but years and years. I mean, this was, sadly, their entire life was probably never normal, whatever that, kind of normalcy would be, I'm sure. And maybe Megan can speak to this more than I can. But I mean, seeing their photos here on the screen and seeing their spirit personified, and then having to even imagine an iota of everything that they dealt with, even if she was just your mom, and, all of the husbands, and the husbands ending up, one died, then, or was murdered. Then the other one, all of a sudden she disappeared with him. Then all of these thoughts that they're having. I mean, there was just so much, even on the surface level, but to really think about the emotional trauma and the kind of mental grooming that they had to deal with just for survival mode, just to get through the day, just to deal with that kind of a mom. I can't even imagine what they went through.
Yeah, Colby talks about this a lot on his channel, what it was like to grow up with Lori as a mom. And he does talk about the instability of moving around and not really having, a foundation, a family foundation, a place where they really felt like they were just settled and where they belonged. And, knowing Lori, I spent time with her a lot. And we were in regular contact up until the time that Tylee was about 3 years old. And, I witnessed her body shaming Tylee as a 3-year-old for being too chubby. And I think that came from her being body shamed when she was chubbier growing up. And just knowing what Tylee must have endured as the daughter of a mother who is emotionally dysregulated, who's unable to take responsibility for her own actions, and who has no empathy. Growing up with a mother like that leaves all kinds of scars for a child that way. So I know for a fact that Tylee's growing up time was not enjoyable and was not stable and was not healthy. And I can only imagine how she treated JJ behind the scenes when no one was watching. When, you have an autistic child who has special needs. And again, as Gigi pointed out, and you did too, COE, that routine is so important. The service dog and the medication and all of those things went out the window as they moved to Idaho. And then the stability of having Tylee taken away. It's no wonder that JJ's emotions were heightened and his behavior probably got worse. And instead of being a mom that really cared about her kids and gets introspective about what could I do to help my child more, instead she, goes along with Chad's crazy idea to label the children as dark rather than just looking at normal childhood behavior as normal. And that's why I say things like Jody Hildebrand, Ruby Frankie, the same type of situation where instead of looking at children's behavior as normal childhood behavior, children are going to test fences. They're going to push back on you. But instead, Jody and Ruby labeled that as evil, and they labeled it as the kids were possessed. The thing that kills me about that documentary is that we see for the first time Jody Hildebrand pretending to be possessed. And yet nobody blames her. Nobody says she's in distortion because she's possessed by a demon. And so it's, the kids are evil, but when Jody's possessed, it's because she's so good that the devil's trying to fight her. These people are twisted and sick, and these ideas are still out there, and we can't stop talking about it.
That's a good point, Megan, about Jody. I got tickled during that scene because she's on the ground grunting and stuff. And I'm like, it kind of reminds me of when I was in labor without an epidural, or maybe like if you're really constipated, she's like, it was so fake. And then you've got Ruby just like putting her head on her hand, and they're trying to. Oh yeah, I don't like glare. Y'all blurry to me. But it is, you have those parallels. But that is true. Like she was so holy that was the invitation into her body.
And they're filming the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like they're documenting it for what?
And she's just like moaning and groaning, and she's talking in other voices like, she's mine. And I'm like, whoa. Oh my God. It's like, I said that documentary was like a combination of Mommy Dearest, The Exorcist, and Lori and Chad. That's it. People were like, what's it like? I'm like, those three things right there. You get a little bit of all of it.
Well, and I specifically didn't watch it because I was just like, it's so disturbing. It's actually weird. My kids happened to hear about the story from another kid at school, and they were asking me if this stuff really happens. And ironically, Joel and I obviously work in true crime, and we cover this all the time. And while my kids hear some things, these details are just so harsh for children. But my kids brought it up, and they told me that there was this YouTuber, like they knew the premise of the story. And I said, I'm like, I chose not to watch it because I felt like for me as a mom, it would be too hard to even visualize the reality of what these kids went through. And the sad part is this was their reality. This was going on, who knows, every single day, all day long. And there was no one there to stop it. There was no one there to filter out this level of like delusion and craziness and abuse, really.
Not even her husband. I mean, for me, I read recently where a lot of people were posting on her oldest son Chad's social media, like, you're still brainwashed. No, that's how he was raised. And he's telling about at the time he thought Jody was a good person. For me, I blame Kevin, because the minute that you see a woman really be the one that comes into your home and starts directing your family away from you, I'm recapping part 2 today, the second episode for later today I'm going to put out. And when Jody and or when Ruby tells Kevin, look, I think you need to move out, he's like, okay. I mean, like, nothing, not like, whoa, like, where this came when she moved in, you're being really mean to the kids. We're exercising demons in the house. Okay, I'll just move out. For me, that's what bothers me, is this dude didn't even try to get in contact with his kids for a year after he moved out. And that was, the peak of all this was the little boy going to the neighbor's house. And even in that police interview, Kevin, they're like, he's very nonchalant. He's shocked, but at the same time, he's still sort of drunk off the Kool-Aid. But it goes to show you that people can get so wrapped up in these crazy theories and totally think that is a reality, to where all of us on the outside are sitting here yelling at the TV, you moron. Like, you walked out on your family and let these two wackadoodles have your kids for a year, and look what happened. It blows my mind. But, I saw a cult leader one time give an interview, and he said, I can take anybody from any demographic, any race, any heritage. You give me a month and I can have you believe in anything I want you to believe in. That's scary. And I think that's probably about right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I think it's so important for us to keep talking about this and talking about the tactics of manipulation and control that these people use, not just cult leaders, but I mean, arguably, Chad and Lori were cult leaders. Arguably, Jody was a cult leader. So was Ruby to a certain extent, and COE, to your point, I think, we're not going to always be able to shield our children from the horrors of the world. And when they get exposed to it, I think the important thing to do is to engage in age-appropriate conversations with them. Mm-hmm. And having to explain my own family's actions to my own children, it's important for them to know that these things do exist and they do happen. And by addressing their fears, I think is really important to say, yeah, there are some moms who care more about themselves and who care more about other things than their children. And you're really lucky that you have a mom that cares about you more than any of those other things.
And before I get final thoughts, I do want to share something quickly. This is off topic, but sort of on topic. For those of you guys that don't know, this show is a second channel, separate of STS. I know there's been a little bit of confusion. So I will be hosting my own shows here, separate of Joel. And we will also have other hosts hopping on here to do their own shows on various topics. I know some of you guys have already met Doug McGregor, the geo profiler, who's been talking about tracking and the importance of profiling and tracking, for example, to track serial killers and their investigations. We have various hosts, and tomorrow we have our first live host, who isn't me. And it will be my friend Kelsey. She used to work at News Nation with Brian Enton and I.
Uh-oh, COE got sucked into a portal.
I literally was muted. I said, she just portaled out. Look, we're on the same wavelength. By the way, me and Megan want to collaborate one day, so keep your eye out.
We are going to collaborate.
Yeah,
we
that'll
need
be
to find
fun.
a topic to do that on. I mean, I wonder what it's going to be, Gigi. What do you think?
I mean, look, we got a lot of things we could talk about, but we all know where we're going to end up.
Yeah,
for sure. I hope to meet you out at trial at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
But
yeah,
I know you guys are ready for all this judicial stuff to be over. But at the same time, it's so important that Charles and Brandon both have their day in court because they were victims. Somebody
Absolutely.
put in the comments about Melanice being arrested. I just don't see it happening.
I mean, I don't either.
Stranger things have happened, but I think out of everybody, Melanice was more wise to what electronics could hold if you talk about this stuff through text message or whatever. But I don't know. I just really don't get the feeling that she will be arrested.
I don't think so, and I've talked about this a lot on my channel because people always want her to be held accountable, as well as the other Melanie and Zulema and anybody else who is involved. And what it comes down to, I've come to learn, unfortunately, is likelihood of conviction.
Yep.
So if the prosecution doesn't think that they're going to get an additional conviction from a co-conspirator, they're not going to spend the time and resources to get that done when they've already got a backlog of huge cases. So I think the way they look at it is that, you know, Tylee, JJ, and Tammy have received justice. Their two major perpetrators are in prison, and the third is dead. And so they're probably not going to go after anyone else at this point in that case. And I am glad. It does get really old seeing Lori out there. It does get really triggering to hear her talk, but I'm really glad that we are pursuing justice for Charles, because that's what's important. And next, justice for Brandon, because that's what's important. So that's where
Within
I'm at with all of it.
inches. I mean, he literally was almost that fifth victim by inches.
Yeah.
And it's scary, but you know, and also you have to look at what not really Melanie's, but what Melanie Gibb and Zulema brought to both trials. What they were able to offer the prosecution as far as the insight that they could give, it probably was worth getting them on their side so that the conviction against Lori and Chad would really stick. And unfortunately for Zulema, you know, trying to kill somebody using magic, it's not a crime, right? I can sit here all day and say, I put a spell on you, Megan Connor, and you know, you're going to fall over. It's not going to happen. But really, Zulema, look, we can talk all day about the fact she was okay with, if the magic had worked, JJ would have died in that car crash with Charles. But it's just not illegal to, you know, play Harry Potter in your spare time. And I'm convinced that this religion or offshoot or splinter cell, whatever you want to call it, was like a combination of like Twilight, Harry Potter. I mean, clearly Chad said he felt like Harry Potter under the stairs, going home to Tammy and all that. But yeah, I think that it's just what little they could have charged them with. Unfortunately, it just wasn't worth pursuing, as opposed to getting them on the prosecution side. And really, Melanie Gibb, I think, probably was the first one that gave the most insight into what was going on. She did that big interview with Nate. You know, she met with law enforcement, and we've seen those tapes. I'm not a fan of any of them, but I do think that's why at least those two weren't charged.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think Melanie Gibb did say a lot. However, I will also say, I think she knows a lot more than she was actually willing to say publicly. And I think she was much more aware of the dynamics of this relationship and these beliefs than she's willing to let on. I think it's easy for them all to kind of play dumb now and say, no, of course we didn't think anyone was actually going to die.
Right.
But if you were around Lori and Chad, you were listening to their rhetoric, you know that they were teaching that in order for the zombie to leave, the body had to die.
Right.
Make that connection. Please tell me that you didn't make that connection. You know, it's beyond belief to me to think that those ladies didn't really know what was going on. The scary thing for me about that, though, and I did an episode about this on my channel, is that I had people contacting me during Chad's trial telling me, hey, you think Visions of Glory was a scary book? Well, let me tell you about this other book, the one that Chad was using, that he was getting some of this theology from. That's why I say I absolutely know there are people out there who are still believing in some of the same things that Chad was teaching. If not believing in Chad himself, believing in things like portals and demons and possession and things like that.
Yeah, it's scary. Don't talk about COE. She's back.
She's back. She's back, everyone. Be cool. Be cool.
I promise I had my phone or my laptop charged and plugged in. But for some reason it shut down. So here
you got a demon in there.
I know.
You have invited evil into your laptop with this episode, COE.
I know. It's funny. I was like, did I say anything wrong? I'm like, am I being censored? But literally, laptop shut down, everything. I couldn't recover it. I had to call Space Coast, panicked. I was like, I can't even sign on to StreamYard because it's connected to Joel's account and it's asking me for the security code. So I'm like, just pop me on any which way.
That's funny.
So I'm back. I have no control
glad you're back.
of anything. So I don't even know if I can end this show, which now I've turned into my husband somehow. But I just wanted to thank both of you guys for taking the time to be here and obviously sharing your perspective and your depth. I'd love to have both of you guys back on eventually after we've seen not only the Lori Vallow Daybell interview, but also maybe some of the jury selection as well, and once things get underway. So I want to thank both of you guys, and if you guys have any final thoughts, although I'm sure you've been buying time over the last few minutes, but if you have anything else you want to share, please feel free to do that right now.
Yeah, final thoughts about Lori's upcoming Dateline, since that's kind of where we started out today. Just that you can expect more crazy from Lori. You can expect her to not take responsibility for anything. You can expect her to take over. And just like Keith Morrison said, she was difficult to interview because she had her agenda of the story she wanted to get out there. What I'm interested to see is what questions that Keith was able to get answered. I love his insights and his ability to kind of put the screws to people and to say, okay, now let's be real for a second. Can you give me some reality? So that's what I'm looking forward to more than anything, is to where is he going to get her to say, to give the answers that he's looking for. But again, ahead of a trial, no attorney would ever allow their client to testify or to do media interviews this close to an upcoming trial. So it's clear that Lori has a fool for a client, and that she's obviously going to do some really dumb things. And the advantage of that, I think, is that we get to have more insight into her psyche. And I think that we definitely see that Lori's still in her delusion, and hopefully we'll just not have very much more of it to have to endure before it's all over.
Yeah, for me, pretty much the same. I'm really interested in the interview just to see what comes out here. I think it just, anytime she can talk just off the cuff, like with Colby, it really gives us that peek into her delusional little mind. But at the same time, I'm just really excited that finally, over 5 years later, we're getting justice for Charles, because he was the first victim in all this. He was the first person killed. And I think Charles definitely would have wanted to see justice for JJ and Tylee first. But, his boys, everybody on Charles's side of the family, it's time for justice. And it doesn't matter how many years pass or that she's got 3 life sentences. Charles and Brandon both deserve the day in court, and I'm ready for it, because it's been a long time coming. And the end is near for Lori. Chad, I mean, when's the last time we heard anything about him? Nothing. And it's going to be nice when she fades away and goes away, and then she is just some random talking point, on some craziest cases of the 2020s. And there's Lori. But, I also hate the fact in a way that she does have this vessel to spread her nonsense. But at the same time, we've heard a lot about what others think of Lori as far as professionals, people that knew her. Let's see what she's made of, because all it's going to do is confirm to us it's all about her. It's not about her kids. It's not about the pain she's caused anybody. She will be the victim by the end of this episode in her own way, and don't expect nothing more than that. And everybody else is to blame but her. So that's what I expect, but ready to get out to Phoenix and see how this unfolds. And I'm not giving her any more stamps this time if she emails me after trial, because somebody wanted me to tell the stamp story. So after Lori's trial in Idaho, I came home, was like getting back to normal, and I have JPay because I talk to several inmates on a regular basis. I get an inbox from Lori Vallow, and I'm like, oh, that's okay. Didn't have that on my bingo card. So I open it up, and she's introducing herself, and then she's like, oh, I want to respond back. Can I have some stamps for, it's kind of reciprocal. So if you're inboxing an inmate, you send stamps so they can respond. I had some extras because everybody I knew on that app had moved over to Securus. So I had like, $20 in stamps that I couldn't use. So I sent them to her, and she ghosted me look, you want to talk about not expecting anything like that on a bingo card. Never, ever, ever would I have thought Lori Vallow would scam me from solitary confinement, but here we are. So I will, and look, I said at her trauma stamp, be like, you owe me 20 stamps. I want them back. So that's about Lori Vallow stole 20 stamps from me story.
Well, I'm glad that you were only scammed 20 stamps and not anything more serious, Gigi.
Yeah, for real.
Stay away from her. Be careful when you go.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be labeled dark by not giving her some stamps. I just I don't believe her, but I don't want to chance it either. So I'm just going to be like, here you go, girl.
Well, thank you to both of you guys. I appreciate it. I was going to share a quick video, a little teaser about the live show that we're doing tomorrow, but I cannot pull it up because I'm on my phone and my arm is now shaking. I'm apparently out of shape. Holding the cell phone is not as easy as it looks. But I do want to let you guys know that tomorrow on this channel, on True Crime Talk, we are going to have a live show on Justin Baldoni and on Live Blakely. We have not covered it in any capacity on our main channel, STS. The host will be a former anchor and reporter. Her name is Kelsey, and this will be her own show. I'll be there in the chat to help her if she needs anything, but we're excited, so please show up. I think it's going to be around 2 p.m. tomorrow, but I will post it and share all of the information with you guys. And again, if you're new here, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. If you've been here before, we appreciate you coming back. Please remember to like and subscribe, and also follow Megan, Connor, and Gigi. They're both amazing people with their own stories, their own shows, and a lot of depth. Thanks, everyone. Space Coast, I can't end the show, so we're just going to wait here until you decide to end it.